Now, back to Willard and Dibs.
It's a great question.
Wow, that's a great question.
That's a great question.
That's a great question.
And
That's a great question.
On 95.7 The Game.
That's my favorite.
That's what we do. We ask great questions, and we have someone coming on right now who is going to field a slew of great questions. All guests on 95.7 The Game appear on the River Islands guest line. Isn't it time for you to discover the island's River Islands in Lathrop? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. It is time for Cleared to Play, where we take you inside the tent, get you updated on the latest injuries in the Bay. Proud to partner with UCSF Health on this segment and bring in Professor of Orthopedic Surgery, Dr. Nirav Pandya. Doc, hey, what's going on?
I'm doing good. I'm ready for some great questions.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask one right now. We're going straight to 49er camp, and I want you, Doc, to can you give me an over-under on when is the right time for a Brandon Ayuk or a Trent Williams to report and not put his body in danger?
So I think for Williams, I am not as concerned about it, just given his age and the fact that he's got the experience. He's also dealt with some injuries in the past. So if Trent Williams is here in a couple weeks, not super concerned about it. I get more worried about Brandon Ayuk just due to the position he plays. He's younger. It's more explosive. And I think we have a little bit of a reflection of that from Bosa last year where, kind of held out a little bit. That early part of the season was not very good. The thing you worry about with these NFL players is that we always get a slew of soft tissue injuries early in camp. So particularly for the position that Ayuk plays, if the first couple of weeks go by and suddenly you only have a little bit of training camp to do the explosive stuff to get used to game speed, then you do worry about week 1, week 2, week 3. Is there going to be that hamstring injury? Is there going to be that quad injury? So for Ayuk, I'd hope within the next week he's in camp, so hopefully he can get enough time in to get his body ready for live reps.
Speaking of hamstrings, Ricky Pearsall's dealing with a hamstring issue, and his former coach, Herm Edwards, came on and talked about how he's a hard worker and he needs to be protected from himself to an extent. When you've got a hamstring issue like he does this early in camp, what's the protocol for easing him back in?
I think typically you are a little bit more cautious. I mean, the fact that I think, yesterday they saw him doing some sprints and kind of moving around pretty well. I think in general, if this was in season, this would be one of those things where like on Sunday, they'll say his hamstring's a little bit sore and he potentially could play the next week. So usually like a grade 1 injury. So I think they are probably a little bit more cautious with him and it can sound a little bit more scary. But typically if it was a bigger issue, you'd be looking at 4 to 6 weeks. So I think they're being cautious with him. He's playing at a position where he's going to be stressing that hamstring. So if anything else, I think it's just more about making sure that his body is ready to take his first full professional training camp than it is an issue of a larger injury.
All right, just keeping the tote board out there. We're 2 questions in, and neither of us have been told yet that it's a great question. But we'll keep trying with Doc Pandya. What about this? And I'll use Brock Purdy as an example, but I mean this in a broader sense. When somebody puts on extra muscle, sometimes I hear people say, well, that'll help protect him from injury. Others might say, gosh, you're stressing certain portions of your body a little bit too much. So for each individual, what's the balance there?
That is a great question, Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you for using my name, too, Doc. That'll help me down the road.
Yeah. I think it is a balance, and I think a lot of it has to do with kind of where you're putting it in proportion to other parts of your body. So I think where the weight is evenly distributed and you're kind of like, look, you put on 20 pounds of muscle mass and it's distributed in your arms and your lower extremities. It's better to have that balance. When people come in and they put on a lot of upper body mass, and you see this a lot with basketball players that come back really bulky and they're not moving as much, then you worry about injuries popping up elsewhere. So I think it does vary a little bit on position, but you want it to be kind of symmetrically all over the body. And I think particularly for athletes who are explosive in speed at the speed positions, putting on that extra weight can impact them more than, say, a lineman or a linebacker.
When you're looking at a return to play from an Achilles injury, Dre Greenlaw, February 11th in the Super Bowl, tears it, complete tear. What's the likelihood of him being ready at all this time this season, Doc?
I think there's probably a very high likelihood. I mean, his 6 months kind of like where he starts can kind of train without any restrictions will be right around August. The surgery was February 15th. I think the biggest variability with this is when does he get his confidence back? When does he get that explosiveness back? So even though everything is structurally healed, how he functionally performs on the field is going to be a really big determinant of when we see him back. The rehab techniques have evolved so much that he should be able to do everything by that 6-month mark. But the mental confidence, how explosive he is, what makes him great, that's where that variability will be. But based on all the reports and based on what he's saying, I would not be surprised if we see him at the beginning of the season. The question is, how much does he look like himself when he's at that week 1, week 2 mark?
Doc, did you take a look at Robbie Ray the other night? Wobbly start right out of the gate, his first outing in 16 months, but what can the Giants take from that?
I think he looks phenomenal after those first 2 innings, and I think obviously we'll get a better sense of it the next couple of games when he's not, throwing 30 pitches in the first 2 innings. But what I'm looking for when someone's coming back from a UCL is, number one, how many pitches do they throw in total? He threw 86 pitches, was a good amount for your first game back. Number two is what you're really more concerned about is not how they start, but how they finish. So if you saw loss of control inning 4, velocity is going down inning 5, then you get worried about things. But the fact that he improved as the game went along, I think that's a great thing. And it really shows how far we've come with UCL surgery. I mean, guys are coming back and throwing this well in their first game back after being away for 16 months. So I think that bodes well for him, and hopefully we'll see that pitch count slowly increase up as the starts start piling up.
Doc, before you go, and just because this is real fresh, the Giants just put Thairo Estrada back on the injured list. It's his wrist again. His numbers are so awful compared to his previous years. So one, what would you say about the injury? And two, is it fair to guess that that's what's leading to his poor performance? Yeah,
I think, based with these wrist injuries, there's kind of a fine line between it's totally healed and it's still bothering you. And a lot of times players will go back with a little bit of soreness. And even though they're still able to play, some of their mechanics, their timing goes off, and then it starts to hurt again and again. And that inflammation kind of comes up. So absolutely, I think that probably is most likely tied to his poor performance. And I think last time he was out for like a week or two, you may potentially see him out for a longer period of time because potentially it didn't really ever get better. And he needs more time for those small muscles in the wrist to get to kind of fully heal up.
Doc, great stuff, great info, and great job saying great question.
Absolutely. Always get great questions on 95.7 The Game. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Perfect, Doc. Thank you.
All right, take care, guys. Yeah.
All right, there it is. That's Doc Pandya, and the proceeding was sponsored by UCSF Health.